that's another area where we just disagree on. And so, it kind of goes on and on and on. But I think at the end of the day, this healthcare piece is the overarching number one issue that we've seen across this district. Even here in Montgomery, I mean, Jackson Hospital is not in a good economic situation right now. We got to look at ways to stabilize it and to make sure it can continue to provide the services, because we know, as there are surrounding rural counties that don't have hospitals, or certainly not fully functioning hospitals. And that's where they seek treatment, right? And if Jackson closes, it's going to put stress on the existing hospitals, which may force some of them into a similar situation. And so we just differ on the pathways to get there, but that's one of the main ones.
All righty. Welcome in, kiddos. Another fantastic week of your favorite political podcast. I am Josh Moon. That is
David Person. What's up?
This is Alabama Politics This Week. So, it's how are you, David?
Oh, man, I'm good. It's a sunny day here in North Alabama. I'm all right. How about you?
I like it. I'm hoping that we can maintain this weather up until a week before Christmas. Let it turn cold, maybe snow a little bit for about 10 days, then right back to this weather, and then get hot. That would be my dream winter right there. Okay.
That'd be your dream winter. Okay.
That's my dream winter. I'll tell you, I am a little concerned about the lack of rain though, because I'm at any point, if somebody drops a cigarette out somewhere, man, we're about to go up like timber over here. So, it is, or like kindling, I guess I should say. It is dry, man, but I love it. Listen, man, I honestly, we had a couple of cold days. About a week and a half, 2 weeks ago or so, and when I was basically borderline depressed on this thing, and I don't say that lightly. I mean it was too soon. I couldn't. It broke up my routine that I have normally, where I get out in the afternoons and I run and and do a workout. In the kind of mid afternoon. I do it in the summer when it's really hot. I don't know why, but that's just always felt good to me to get out when it's 99, 100 degrees. So I mean, it's but now this is great, man, and I'll let you in on another little secret. We're going. Me and the fam are headed down. Matter of fact, just about not long after we record this, we're headed down to OWA. Are you familiar with OWA?
I'm not.
It is the entertainment center in, I don't know of a better way to say that is owned by the Porch Band of Creek Indians in Foley. It's an amusement park, got roller coasters and rides and stuff. It is a water park with all sorts of slides and different water features there. A little town area set up with restaurants and shops, theaters, all sorts of different things for families to do. And we're going to go down and check it out. I'm sure I'll have some more to report. I may actually write some story about it. We're taking my daughter, and it's the Halloween weekend stuff going on down there. So where there's a costume contest and all that. So we're gonna go down and check it out and see. I can't tell you. Now, first of all, you should just go online and look at the photos of the place. It's remarkable. And I'm not overselling it. I'm telling you, go down, just go online and look at the photos. It's unbelievable. And the fact, and then what's unbelievable about it is not that it exists, because obviously, we have Six Flags and other places that are around. So we know that such rides exist and stuff, but it's the fact that hardly anybody ever talks about it. You're like the fifth or sixth person that I've told we're going down to this thing, and they're like, "Oh, I'm unfamiliar with OWA," or even I've heard of OWA, but I'm not sure what it is exactly or what all is available there.
And I'm even trying to spell it. How do you spell it?
OWA.
Okay.
And so, we're going to go down and do this. Obviously, as everybody knows by now, Wind Creek Entertainment is a sponsor of this fine program, and we really appreciate them, for all they do here. And, and through that little partnership that we have here on the show, I've been able to make friends with several folks within the tribe and within tribal leadership. And I honestly, I've found them all to be really, really great people and just kind of down to earth folks. And, went and did the visit with them and a tour of the reservation and the services that are offered. a few weeks ago, and I mean, it was just really striking to me to see, first of all, the quality of services and things that they have supplied to folks that have tribal membership and who are tribal members, and but even more than that, it was such a family type atmosphere, and just how everybody knew each other and grew up with each other and knew what was going on. And I mean, it was really, it was honestly, it was endearing. I don't know of a better term to describe it. It was so endearing to listen to them talk about, growing up together and, jumping over fences and sneaking into the basketball courts and, just a variety of different things long before there was, the wealth that has come to them of late. These folks were together and were family and were looking out for each other, and they're still pretty much doing that. And it was just really kind of an endearing story. And, but, they run OA, and I think that we're going to go down and see, what it's all about, and hopefully we can maybe shine a little light on that as well, and let folks know,
nice.
At least know that it exists, right? I mean, at least let people know what's going on, and how much fun it can be. And I honestly just look. I've never been. I've driven past it a bunch of times, but I've never been. And just looking at the photos and stuff, it's unbelievable that I had no idea it was of such quality. So, anyways, look them up online if you wouldn't mind. Wind Creek Entertainment. See if you can book a room at one of their fantastic resorts. Book a room at one of the hotels within OA, and go and visit them. So, all right, let's get into the body of this thing. We are less than 2 weeks away from a small election, that may or may not the balance. The future of the country may hang in the balance. I don't know.
I think it does, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, that's probably true. But I mean, it's I honestly, I do worry about what Donald Trump might do, and the way his policies and the way the things that he would like to do might affect, certain groups of people. I think that we came dangerously close last time, to having essentially a coup. I don't know where that would have left us. But and I want people to go out and obviously vote against this crazy person who's running for election, and I think they will. Ultimately, I think Kamala Harris is going to win. But I also, I want people to. I've heard a lot of just overwhelming anxiety, stories of overwhelming anxiety from people, and this overwhelming fear from people and stuff. And and I think, listen, there may be some bad things that occur. All right. But we also have a government in place that I would say has more good people than bad in it. And I think that it is a strong check on what one crazy individual can do. Now, obviously, I think, that what we said before, or what I said before, aside, about the coup that was led and the surprise of things and how it could deteriorate. I think more people are ready for that at this point, and are ready for things like that. I don't care for the fact that so many people are still kowtowing to this crazy wannabe dictator guy, but I do think that there are enough checks and balances in place to keep the American system of government in line, no matter who the president is. And again, I don't think it's going to be Donald Trump. I'm just trying to tamp down a little bit of the anxiety of folks that are so worried about, this place turning into 1940s Germany or 1930s Germany, and us losing complete control of what was once the greatest democracy known to man, and being ceded over to, of all people, Donald fucking Trump.
I don't think that's I don't think that's the real danger that's likely, because like you, I don't think Trump really has a chance to win the popular vote or the electoral college with all the momentum that Kamala Harris has gained, and with the political savvy of her people. They seem to understand the areas that they need to focus on in order to win this race, and they seem to be doing a good job of doing it. My concern, though, is there's still a high enough percentage of people. If you listen to some of the polling out there, there's still a high enough percentage of people who believe strongly enough in Trump that they even think a violent takeover of the nation would be justified. And so what I'm concerned about is disruptors. And I also do not underestimate the ability of the Trump campaign and the MAGA movement to try to apply whatever lessons they've learned from the test run of legally circumventing the electoral process, or illegally circumvent it through the use of false electors and through pressuring and also, I think, beguiling secretaries of state in some cases to do things that are illegal, or pressuring secretaries of state to do illegal things, as we saw the attempt made in Georgia that was strong. I think there's enough of that still out there, still alive and well, Josh, that even with a Trump electoral defeat, there's going to be enough commotion that I don't expect things to just move forward as though nothing happened. I think we've been forever changed because of the magnitude of the MAGA movement.
Well, I think that's true. Although I do think if he loses, it's done. It's done. The movement dies. In 5 years, you won't be able to find a person who will admit to wearing one of those stupid red hats. It'll be something that we shame people with, 10 years down the line. But, I do. And so I understand what you're saying. I think what made it so dangerous last time, the element that made it so dangerous last time will be removed from it this time. And that is the fact that he has no control over the military. He has no control over the White House. He will not be in any, when he loses, he will not have any power. He will have zero power. He'll only have the reliance of his friends who are, let's be honest, who are mostly idiots. I mean, if you're going to rely on people to lead a coup or some sort of complicated process against anyone, and you're relying on folks like Tommy Tuberville and Barry Moore, you're pretty much toast. You know what I mean? And so I just think that him losing that's a wrap on things. All right. And I believe that the MAGA movement, then I believe it dies. If something were to happen to Trump at some point, I've always said the same thing. If he had a health problem or, whatever would have happened, it would have been the end of it, because no one can carry that forward. And you've seen other people try. Ron DeSantis is probably the closest to it. He's certainly, I think, the smartest and most willing to debase himself out of the group. And he couldn't pull it off. He couldn't pull it off with anybody. Hell, half the people in his state hated him, And so I don't think that there's any person out there, and certainly not those idiot kids of Trump's. I don't think there's anybody out there that can carry this thing off and behave, because let's be honest, while Trump is a deplorable human being, there are very few people who possess the skills. I'll use that. I think it's a more kind term than it's deserved, but the skills of being able to lie so fluidly and so believably, and to almost seem as though he believes it himself, and to take such an egotistical, narcissistic view of everything around him, to the point where there is nothing you can say to him that penetrates that bubble of narcissism that he exists within. There is nothing that you can hit Donald Trump with that hurts him, and which he does not have a comeback or a response that completely absolves himself of it, no matter if it's just ridiculous bullshit. You could say almost anything to Donald Trump at some point. You could say, listen, you compared yourself to Hitler and talked about wanting Hitler's generals, and well, that's not what I said. So again, it's fake news media trying to, and it would just be, he would launch into something about how he's not going to tax tips, and that's what he does. And there's no one else who can do that with such supreme confidence and disregard for everybody else. There's nobody else out there like that.
I can name one person.
Okay.
J.D. Vance. I think J.D. Vance showed during the debate with Tim Walz that he has the ability to soft sell convincingly in almost a mild, almost Clark Kent kind of way, the evil that is Trump and the MAGA movement. He presented a version that was almost palatable, I think, and certainly showed a lot of savvy. So I think he is the one who not only has the ability to sell it well, he's got a more telegenic look. He's younger. I think he's pretty rich, if I understand, for real. So, I mean, I think he's a real clear and present danger in terms of moving that MAGA movement forward. The other thing, though, that I want to present on this that I think we've got to remember is, the Confederacy was supposed to have died in 1865.
Right.
And yet it has not. The spirit of the Confederacy has lived on to this day. We see the flags that people will still display. We see some of the ideology of the Confederacy still at play in the southern states in particular, but it's tainted really the whole nation. I would argue that just like the Confederacy didn't die as a concept, MAGA, which I think is really just you can call it a great grandchild of the Confederacy or a bastard child of the Confederacy or whatever you want. But I think the reality is MAGA is just another iteration of the Confederacy. So I think that spirit and those concepts, they can't be killed. They're going to live on. You can't kill ideas. People die, but ideas don't. And I think that continues to live on and will.
Well, I listen. I didn't mean to suggest that we're going to squash racism if Donald Trump is defeated, because let's be honest. That's what a lot of this is. You can say that you hear all the excuses about the economy, which are bullshit. Donald Trump did nothing for the economy, and you can't point to a single thing that says he did. You hear the stuff about the pro-America. That's bullshit. I had a conversation, one of the more disturbing conversations I've ever had yesterday with an attorney, a very prominent attorney in this state, who I respect a lot. And some of the bullshit that came out of his mouth about Donald Trump, I flat told him, look, dude, that's some of the most racist stuff I think I've ever heard, where you're talking about protecting the Western culture of America. And I said, that's just baked in race. It's another word for racism. You just want white people, that's you want a white culture, and you don't, all of these things that, because the culture, I said, America doesn't have a culture. It's stolen everybody else's culture and combined it into this melting pot. That's what America is. That's what it's always been. I said, I think if the people are going to come here, because he was trying to make this case for why the border is the most important issue ever. And I said, it's weird how the border is only a really important issue every 2 to 4 years. And why the folks who are coming across that border need to assimilate to America and adopt the American culture of things. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. And what else? And learn the language. I said, oh, I'm sorry. I was not under the impression that the United States had an official language. When did that occur? Well, the official language is English, and we all know it. And I said, look, man, if you want to talk about adopting the culture of America and you want to adopt an official language, unless you're talking about fucking Navajo or some shit, then you don't know what you're talking about, all right? Because that was the only language that was here, those languages of those tribes who were here long before us white folks rolled up on the lands. Those might qualify as an official language. But as far as I could tell, we're not learning those anytime soon. And as a matter of fact, we got a lot of tribes out there who are trying desperately to hold on to those languages. But at the same time, this is what has permeated. That's MAGA. All right. That is MAGA. The white people are being squeezed out by the immigrants, by the black folks, by the, by the Asian folks, I mean, I said, we've got a whole country built on Chinatowns, Little Italies, I mean, the Irish boroughs, all of these different places. It's a mishmash of everybody, man. Little Louisiana with and the French and the Creole it's just, what are you talking about when you say the American culture of things? The American culture is to steal everybody else's culture and make it all work together. That's why we've succeeded and why they've been success. And I mean, I'll say this. By the end of the conversation, he left and said he was exhausted and that I'd won. So, I mean, that's all I really wanted.
You wore him out, huh? Good. I'm glad you wore him out. But the fact that you're still having that conversation in 2024 with somebody who you said you have respected and you think is intelligent, I think makes my point. MAGA is not going anywhere. It may reemerge at some point. After going underground, it may resurrect itself, if it ever indeed does go underground. But I'm telling you, it's not going anywhere. Just like the spirit of the Confederacy has refused to cede ground in this country.
Well, I don't to the point you're making about where it's aligned with the Confederacy and things like that. I don't disagree. What I do. What I do think is going to die is this abnormal behavior for especially a president of the country, where we are accepting of this abnormal, offensive, childish, ridiculous behavior from the highest office in our country. And I think that's where Donald Trump has been given a pass to do and say things that other folks don't get, even currently don't get, even within that party don't get. Okay? I mean, you look at the way Nikki Haley was judged. You look at the way Ron DeSantis was judged. You look at the way J.D. Vance is judged, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying about J.D. Vance. I do think he does not have the charisma of a Donald Trump, and I know charisma is often cited as a quality for somebody, a redeeming quality. I think Trump had a redeeming quality of charisma. He was a very charismatic guy, up until everybody learned what it really was going on in that space above his ears, Well,
I think he's retained with the people that follow him. I think he retains that charisma. Yeah. That perception of charisma.
Man, I say this, if you watch the man work a room and talk to people and things, I mean, you can understand why he's a likable fella. You can understand it if you're not getting into his beliefs and what he might do to the country. If you elected the man president, you can understand why he is a likable guy to so many people. But I don't think J.D. Vance has that. I don't think he has the ability to overcome what's going to be very radical ideas in terms of the way we expect a president to act or behave. I don't think he has the charisma to overcome that and for people to gravitate towards him, or for other and the ability to stand on a stage and call somebody Little Marco or Lion Ted or whatever, and it be this thing that people gravitate towards. I think it turns people off in the same way that it has with some others. And I think that's where I say the MAGA movement is going to, the racism part of it has been baked into the Republican Party since 1965. And that's just all there is to it. And that shit ain't never dying. And because they know that's the base and that's the folks they can rely on. And they're going to continue to talk about welfare queens and everything else. And disparage people. They're a little more clever about it these days than they have been in the past. But it's the other part of that I think dies and goes away. And we have to get back to some level of normalcy, some level of normal awful, I'll say, within the Republican Party. There's some level of normal awful. And I think that's where there is at least some saving grace of Donald Trump just going the hell away. Because
the toxic personality that is Trump, I think probably will go away. But what I'm saying is, I think it's going to be replaced by what Vance put on display, what we saw put on display with Tim Walz. I think we're going to see we probably won't see another Trump, but what we are going to see is a Trump light. And somebody who's much more able to connect with a broader number of people. The way Vance presented himself, he did not allow petty narcissism to get in his way as he made his case. His tone was softer. He was more engaging, definitely more telegenic. I think that's where the future is. I think it's with that kind of personality.
Well, to me, that's just the past. I mean, that right there is no different than many of the other Republican nominees that are coming along, that are out there. I mean, it's
so like a Reagan or somebody,
yeah. I mean, they did the same shit. They prettied it up, I think George W. Bush was that. I think he gradually changed a lot after he left office and became a more likable figure at this point. And I think a lot of that had to do with his friendship with Michelle Obama and the Obamas in general. But I think that, a lot of those same things were present in him as well. And certainly within Dick Cheney, who is, now endorsing the Democratic nominee. But all right, look, let's slide out of here. We come back, really, really good guest. We ought to charge people for guests this good. We really should, because we've got the guy who's probably going to be representing the newly drawn 2nd Congressional District in Alabama. Shamari Figures is going to join us when we come back. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. We're back in a minute. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy, as always, to be joined by Shamari Figures. Is there something going on with you right now? I mean, are you involved in anything? Is there some election or anything that's happening that around the state that you're part of? I'm unaware.
Just a little congressional race down here in Southern Alabama, man. But it's going though. It's going.
That's right. It has grabbed some national attention. I noticed there's going to be some national Democrats coming down to campaign with you in the coming days. How do you? I guess just right off the top, how do you feel like things are going?
Look, man, like we've always run this race from a perspective of leaving it all out on the field, just not having any regrets come election day that we didn't do everything that we could, certainly within our power to do, to touch as many voters and get our message out to as many people and try to inspire and motivate as many people to get out and go vote. And we feel good about that effort. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure that, that we're running through the tape, running through the finish line. We don't really look at polls. We don't really look at, even just the fundraising metrics, because we're running against somebody that, can throw as much money as she wants at any given time. So we keep our head to the ground, man, and just keep it moving forward. And, I feel good about the effort that we're putting forth going down the stretch here.
Right. All right. Well, you've been out, knocking on doors and talking to people and, moving around all over this, the district. What what do you feel like is the biggest keys right now? What are the things that the voters that you hear from are most worried about or most concerned about, and where do you separate from Caroline Dobson on those issues?
Look, I think the biggest things that we hear about are, I'd say the top two are healthcare access, and healthcare issues in a variety of different contexts. And then secondly, it would be just economic opportunities and economic investments and across this district as a whole, just to improve economic possibilities and outcomes for people overall. On the healthcare, front, like it's one of those things where, we know Mobile and Montgomery, right? Those are the two big cities. But once you come out of those two bigger counties in this district, healthcare access is a real challenge, man, district wide. I mean, just since we've been in this race, 13 counties, you set Montgomery and Mobile kind of to the side, leaves 11 counties. Two already didn't have hospitals. That leaves 9. And just since we've been in this race, we've had 4 facilities close across those other 9 counties. And so, it's a serious issue. It's one that we have to devote a lot of time to if we're fortunate enough to win, to trying to address. And from my perspective, a big piece of that puzzle is expanding Medicaid, and again, using federal incentives to incentivize the state of Alabama to finally do what's right and do what 40 some odd other states have already done, expand Medicaid to get more health care to people. Because had that already happened, that hospital that just closed last month in Bullitt County would still be open. And so, I fully support expanding Medicaid. It was something that came about under Obamacare. It was something that came about under the Obama regime, and something that I personally feel the state of Alabama has stood against because of that fact. And I think that's one place where my opponent and I disagree. She's all about repealing the Affordable Care Act, which allowed for Medicaid expansion, which the majority of states in this nation, the vast majority, overwhelming majority, have already taken advantage of. And if you repeal that, that sets back, the possibility of being able to drive resources in the immediate, time context to keep these hospitals open across not just the state of Alabama, but across this country. And that's a big piece of it. Healthcare access in general is something, I think where we differ. I think the Affordable Care Act has had a significant impact on people being able to access healthcare. We know that health insurance enrollment rates across the country are at all-time highs, and she's advocated repealing it and getting rid of that. And that's something that I not only helped, in my capacity at the White House, had a role in driving the pieces to help implement it. It's something that I've benefited from personally, and my story is not unique. And so that's another area where we just disagree on. And so it kind of goes on and on and on. But I think at the end of the day, this healthcare piece is the overarching number one issue that we've seen across this district. Even here in Montgomery, I mean, Jackson Hospital is not in a good economic situation right now. We got to look at ways to stabilize it and to make sure it can continue to provide the services, because we know, as there are surrounding rural counties that don't have hospitals, or certainly not fully functioning hospitals. And that's where they seek treatment, right? And if Jackson closes, it's going to put stress on the existing hospitals, which may force some of them into a similar situation. And so we just differ on the pathways to get there, but that's one of the main ones.
Mm. So Shomari, of course, we like what we hear when you talk in this way about trying to preserve the Affordable Care Act. But we also understand that this is not just a federal issue, it's a state issue, and you won't just be challenged by, let's say if Trump were to win, you wouldn't just be challenged by the Trump administration. You've got a really intransigent state, conservative state administration that has been in opposition of this, or expanding Medicare. So what do you do? What's your game plan if you win, and you've still got to deal with a governor and a legislature that are anti-Affordable Care Act and against expanding Medicare?
Yeah, look.
Sorry.
Yeah, Medicaid, but it's it's
Medicaid,
it's one of those things that regardless of who's in charge of the White House, or regardless of who wins the majority in the House, regardless of who wins the majority in the Senate, we know that Republicans, at the end of, because there are no state elections, we know Republicans will still control, all three branches here in the state of Alabama. We got to work with them. We got to have sensible conversations, right? Like, I don't believe that it's the role of a congressman to go up to Washington, D.C. and just be the, a partisan, person that just, sticks on one side and just worries about what you can get when your side is in power. Because the truth of the matter is there are Republicans that are struggling with the same issue in Mississippi, right, in Louisiana, in Texas. And so we got to work together, and we need to have a productive relationship, regardless of party affiliation here in the state of Alabama. And that's something that I'm committed to having. That being said, the last state legislative session looked like the needle moved a little bit more than it has moved in the combined 15 years, or 14 years rather, at least towards having those legitimate conversations about how to do it. So I think we are headed in the right direction. But there's certainly a role that the federal government has to play in pushing that needle forward by re-incentivizing the state of Alabama to expand Medicaid. Hopefully that's something that we can do. In the event it's not something that we can do, we have to explore other ways to get resources here to the state. And in my opinion, what that looks like is figuring out a way to drive resources to these rural communities first and foremost, to be able to help keep these hospitals open. Because it's more than just a healthcare access issue. It is an issue of economics. Because at the end of the day, Nick Saban can't drive home the recruiting pitch to a business to come set up in a community when that conversation begins with, we don't have a hospital, right? And so it's something that it's prohibitive of being able to recruit in companies to set up. It's prohibitive to families that want to live there, raise their kids there. Nobody wants to raise their children. If they have an option, they're not going to choose to raise their children for the majority of people in an environment where you're 45, an hour and a half away from a hospital. And so that's something that we have to understand, that this is about much more than just the health piece of it. It's an economic issue as well. And I think, we can work together to come to some solution in trying to drive resources through that lens as well.
Now, I know Josh is not an Alabama fan, so maybe he wasn't going to call you on this, but I thought I heard you say Nick Saban as opposed to the current coach's name.
Well, I think Nick Saban historically has a better recruiting track record, right? Just based on history right now, right?
Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, I was just referring to his ability to recruit, his proven ability to recruit.
It's a shame that he's gone. Boy, it sure is a shame he's out of there. I got to say, I hate that so
slip.
Much as an Auburn fan that he's gone.
I thought it was a Freudian slip because you were wishing for brighter days. That's what I thought you were.
Oh, no, look, man, I love Alabama. I'm an Alabama fan, but I went to Alabama undergrad and law school, but I'm a realistic Alabama fan. And, okay. I'm one of those guys who looked at how we performed, beginning with South Florida and then blowing the lead against Georgia. You kind of saw this coming.
Okay.
And so I'm realistic. I love the Crimson Tide football team, but I'm realistic in my outset. I think we'll probably drop at least one, if not two more games. And, it's the writing is on the wall. You got to be realistic, right? Just like in Congress, right? With these policy discussions, you got to begin with reality, right? You got to begin with what you see. You got to begin with what you see. And recent performance is certainly something that's indicative of future performance if you don't make significant changes.
I got you.
It's kind of how we know Auburn is probably going to drop at least four more, right?
That sounds like shade there, Josh.
Stay on topic. This is the problem with politicians. They won't stay on topic.
Well, let me. I think I caused that digression. Let me bring it back on. What's right now? You're less than 2 weeks away from the election, Shomari. Mm-hmm. What's the biggest challenge you're facing?
Look, I think it's voter turnout. Right, beginning about 4 weeks out, you kind of shift all things to motivating as many people to get registered to vote down that final stretch, which we passed that date already this past a few days ago on the 21st. But then it's just educating people that that need to vote by absentee to get out and do it, and then also just motivating people on election day to get up and go vote. Unfortunately, Alabama does not have early vote, which I'm a huge proponent of, which apparently even Donald Trump is a proponent of. Something that we need here in the state of Alabama. I'm a proponent of moving election day from a Tuesday to a Saturday, to increase that sort of turnout and opportunities for people to vote. But We are where we are in terms of the guidelines that are in place. And so we have to just turn our attention to what we, think historically is the biggest challenge. And I mean, fortunately, during presidential election years, Alabama typically has a pretty good turnout. In 2020, it was 62%. And that was low compared to previous years, lower than, I think I've seen it in the last three presidential elections. I believe I saw it as high as 72 or 73% in terms of registered voter turnout. So we have to, make more efforts to get more people registered, but we're beyond that point now. So we just got to turn our attention to literally being able to drive people to the polls on election day across this district. In 13 counties is a large territory to do that. This is a district that's not used to having competitive congressional races. Certainly not for much of this district for the past 2+ decades. Some parts of the district even longer than that. And so motivating people to get up and go vote is the big thing. And we've seen some positive indications that people are excited to get up and go vote on November the 5th.
I was going to ask you about that because I think when Kamala Harris first hopped in this race, it energized the Democratic base of voters and Democrats everywhere, and even it spurred a lot of people, I think, to go out and register to vote for the first time. A lot of new voters out there. There was a lot of excitement. Has that sustained? Has that waned from what you've seen? Is it more difficult now to kind of get the engagement where it wasn't a couple of weeks ago?
No, I think at least here in Alabama, it's I would say at worst it's plateaued. I have not seen any sort of decline. I've not seen any sort of like people saying, yeah, I thought I was going to go vote, but I don't think I'm going to. We've seen people who are generally very excited. Especially within certain demographics, to have Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. I mean, African American women, are very excited, right? We know that they are the most likely voter bloc in general. So seeing someone where they see themselves in a candidate is helped driving that. HBCU graduates, especially here in the state of Alabama, where we have the most HBCUs of any state, and even in this district, we have at least three: Alabama State, Tuskegee, and Bishop State. Community college down in Mobile, possibly one more. I just need to double check on the designations of Trenum. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where people feel that they can resonate with her because she went to an HBCU. She's a Black Greek woman. And as you guys know, here in Alabama, we have a disproportionately large population of Black Greek men and women. But deltas and AKAs and zetas and sigmas, and, kappas and alphas and omegas. And zetas, like it's a thing down here. People feel that they can resonate with that, and so we've seen that excitement. Like I say, at worst plateau, but in some circles, I think it's still the closer we get to election day, the more excited people are getting.
Yeah, I think this thing is and you can obviously feel free to disagree, but it seems to me, I've always thought that this race would turn on what happens within the suburbs around Montgomery and Mobile, where there is a pretty solid mix of Black and white voters. And I think that surprises a lot of people that there are a number of more Democratic voting white voters, especially around, I know for a fact around Montgomery, because I lived there for a long time. And I think that's just typical of any large city. Whenever people live together, they start voting, in the same way. They see each other with the same common interest. And all of a sudden race doesn't matter as much anymore. It's those shared interests. How do you feel like y'all are doing in those suburbs? And do you feel like that there's any particular topics that have come up that have been surprising in those areas?
Look, I think it's when you look at the data, right? Like, about 70% of the people in this district live in Mobile County or Montgomery County. And so for a number of reasons, like pathways to victory flow through performance in those counties. However, I will say that when you break it down, the district is almost a third. And what I mean by that is about roughly, right? Just generally speaking, about a third of the vote will come out of Mobile, about a third of the vote will come out of Montgomery, and about a third of the vote will come out of all of the other counties combined. And so that other third certainly cannot be overlooked, although, we know in many of those counties not named Mobile or Montgomery, we know it's an uphill battle in terms of getting those to a 50% threshold in terms of being able to flip them. But I mean, there's positive signs and there's some historical data that indicates that it's certainly possible. And like the Russell counties and Barber counties, I mean, Biden and Jones won Russell County. Barber County, I think, was only like a 600 or 700 vote difference, maybe 800 vote difference. So it's possible in those counties as well. And then some of the other counties are, they can be competitive. Butler County and Conecuh County, those are all counties where we can play. But specifically just in Montgomery and Mobile, look, the reception has been good. I mean, and I think you got to kind of look at them a little bit differently because Mobile, right, there's the geographical sort of loyalty piece that's at play because it's where I'm from, and Mobile has not been without a congressman from Mobile and wow, I think it's like close to 70 years or so, 70, 75 years. So it's almost like an expectation, that you have, of people there locally, that they have some degree of local representation in Washington, D.C., especially, they sort of reclaim the position of second largest city in the state. And so there are a lot of people there that vote on that localized interest, which certainly crosses racial lines. And so, it's seeing good there. We're seeing good progress there in Montgomery. The same, we think that the reception has just kind of been, universally good across the board. Polling numbers are indicating, support across racial lines, which is something that we like to see and something that, that we need to see. And so in terms of issues, I mean, I'd say, and like when you get into some of like the suburban issues, they still care very much so about the economics. They still care very much so about gun violence and just the status of making sure that we're making investments to keep our community safe overall. And they care very much so about the healthcare access piece as well, especially like in Montgomery. Like they understand the realities that, each one of these surrounding counties that lose a hospital is creating more stress locally and further jeopardizing the hospitals here in Montgomery. Especially without Medicaid expansion, right? Which is something that people understand here. So I'd say economic issues, healthcare access, safe communities, a lot of the same issues that we're hearing across the district as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, man. I think every indication, I think it looks good. But I hope that you do keep it up and run through the tape like you said, and keep this thing going. I think that obviously you have actual policies and you have actual plans, and that's always helpful. When you talk about the gun violence issue, it can't just be hey, more guns. And so I really appreciate what you're doing and what you said, and really thank you for spending some time with us. And we'll send as many folks out there to vote for you as we can.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys giving us this platform as well as the coverage that you guys provide. I think you guys are doing a good service of presenting news in a very in a way that is not often the case here in this state. And so we appreciate it, man, and looking forward to getting back here soon.
Absolutely, awesome. Absolutely. Hey, when he comes back, he'll be the U.S. rep from this.
Hopefully.
That's right. That's right.
All right. That is future U.S. Rep Shamari Figures. We're going to slide out of here. We'll be back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. I want to thank the folks at Wind Creek, the folks at Southern Poverty Law Center for sponsoring this baby and keeping us on the air and, where we can buy nice things, and maybe possibly send one small child to college through the College Scholarship Fund that I'm sponsoring. So if you'd like to donate, just let me know, and I'll tell you where, I'll tell you where to send the money. Also, thanks to Shamari Figures for dropping by and spending some time. And I should probably tell everybody, I thought about this the other day. If you'd like to rate and review, we would still appreciate that. We've got a lot of ratings and a lot of stars on the old iTunes, but it always helps. So if you could go in and drop us a line, and let us know if you like the show, or also if you would like to email APW Producer. That's APW Producer at gmail.com. You can send us an email there. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, have a conversation. If you had some topics in mind you'd like for us to cover or to talk about or to look into, we certainly would take them in there. And as anybody will attest, especially Don, who's just about finished mowing the grass at this point, we do respond to the emails. So, all right. Before we wrap this thing up and get with our right wing nut, there was two things that we wanted to get to. One was this weird deal that has taken place over the last couple of months between the governor of this state, Kay Ivey, and the commissioner of the Department of Veterans Affairs in this state, Kent Adams. I've never seen anything quite like this. This is one of the dumber scandals, I guess you could call it. And I mean, if you haven't followed along, I wrote a lengthy column that just kind of covered everything that's happened and laid out what happened. But Kay Ivey ended up firing this guy. Now, whether or not she has the authority to fire Kent Davis, I don't really know. I would suspect she does not. And the reason that I would suspect she does not is that Kent Davis does not work at the pleasure of the governor. He works at the pleasure of the board, the State Board of Veterans Affairs, of which Kay Ivey is a member. So I don't know how it would work if one member, albeit the governor, can kind of usurp the power of the full board when the full board has declined to fire this guy, because she asked the board to fire him. The board declined to fire him, voted to keep him. He has agreed to resign at the end of the year. But that was not good enough because she said he had violated the agreement. And this all goes back to this weird deal where there was a bill that was going to devote some money to mental health care for veterans during the last legislative session. And it involved the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Mental Health. And, the Veterans Affairs folks felt like the Department of Mental Health had got in and had somehow or another finagled this whole process in a manner in which benefited the Department of Mental Health and squeezed out the Veterans Affairs folks a little bit. And so they believed it was so nefarious. And I've talked to a lot of people who were kind of, I won't say involved, but I'll say that know very well what happened. And they said it just seemed to them like normal kind of maneuvering between departments to get money that was available, and not really a big deal, and certainly not anything that violated the law. They didn't think, but these folks did, the folks that were involved in it, and they took it to Kent Davis. And he filed an ethics complaint against the head of the Department of Mental Health, and some others. And that apparently just enraged Kay Ivey, who was just very unhappy with him after that, and called for his resignation. He pushed back and on some claims that she made to justify his resignation. I think simply because she did not want to say it was all based upon this, the filing of the ethics complaint. And so now here we are 2 months into this thing, and he's agreed to resign at the end of the year after he met with Ivey and her staff. He agreed to resign. And then at a board meeting after he had agreed to resign, the board of Veterans Affairs come back and voted to ask him to rescind it. Because they liked his leadership so much. And of course, Kay Ivey then accused him of orchestrating this. And to be fair, another board member also accused him of orchestrating it, said he had pressured some people on the board. That's a shit show of a deal, man. What is going on here? I don't.
Well, I think you asked the relevant question at the end of your column that you wrote. And I, by the way, I want to commend you on writing a column that really takes a very, a situation that has a lot of labyrinthine twists and turns to it. And you made it, I think, so that people could kind of follow it, because it's just really, there's just a lot to this. But I think you asked the relevant question at the end of your column, which is, if she had the authority to just fire him, Why didn't she do it months ago? This whole thing exploded back in September. So if she could have just fired him in September, why didn't she do that? The fact that she waited and that she tried to use what I would say are political processes to bring this man down makes me wonder, A, about whether or not she really can legally do what she's done, and B, what was going on that made her think that she needed to use a political process, and then C, what was the urgency in getting rid of him when the political process failed, when it blew up in her face? What was the urgency then in making a unilateral decision to get rid of him, which probably is going to be challenged legally? It just all seems very strange. Like there's something going on there that, and let me be clear, I'm not accusing the governor of anything illegal. But it just seems as though there's something going on there that she doesn't want us to know about. That's the way it looks to me.
I don't know, man. I'll tell you, even, and I said that, why, if she had the authority to do it, why didn't she do it 2 months ago? But even more than that, if she had the authority to do it, why didn't she do it a week and a half ago? I mean, before calling the meeting and stuff, because to me, her deciding not to show up to this special called meeting that she called says she knew she didn't have the votes to get rid of him. So why even go through it then? And why bother with the process?
My point.
And I don't know, man. It just. I'm like you. I'm not accusing her of anything. The whole thing seems so, especially the last part of this, seems so counterproductive all around. I mean, if he's going to leave, I mean, her complaints essentially boiled down to he had orchestrated this thing to the board vote that said, oh, we want you to rescind the resignation. And I don't understand it, man. I really don't.
Well, how is that even an actionable offense? I mean, a person has a right to. First of all, the board had a right to ask him to reconsider his resignation. Legally, they have that right. Yeah. Nothing illegal about that. There's nothing illegal about standing up for yourself. And, when your boss wants to get rid of you, standing up for yourself, and saying, hey, I don't want to go. Give me some due process or I want to defend myself. So the whole thing is just kind of, again, it makes me question what is really at the root of all this. There's something going on that has not been disclosed to the public that either she doesn't want it, that it seems to me she doesn't want us to know. That's the way it looks to me.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It just, it just, the whole thing is just so weird. And, and I don't know. I've talked to a lot of people around this and I mean, to your point, because I felt the same way. I mean, they say, well, no, as far as they know that it's all pretty straightforward and laid out there and this is what's happened. But I don't, it doesn't make any sense to me why this has gone down the way that it has. And you're right. I mean, in the letter, she cites the authority to do this. She bases it on gambling law of all things. But I don't know if a lot of people realize that. But she says it's to ensure the laws are followed. But she never claims in there that he violated any law. It doesn't, I say, the whole thing is just
that was another good point that you made in your column, I thought. And so which makes me wonder, I know sometimes what happens with powerful people who are in a tug of war, it becomes about personalities. Yeah. It becomes almost what some people would call a pissing contest.
Yes.
And so maybe that's what this is. Maybe this is just two type A personalities who are bumping heads and it's no more than that. Maybe that's what this is. Yeah. Or maybe it's something deeper and more disturbing. But again, I think it's obvious that there's more going on than what we're seeing on the surface. This is not, it's not as simple as maybe she might want us to think it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that completely. And I don't know. Speaking of not being able to, or possibly things not looking like what they appear to be on the surface, there's also the story of Dennoriss Richardson, and this is. I've read just enough about this to be dangerous. And I know you have looked at it a little more deeply than I have. And Mr. Richardson was found hanging in an abandoned house in Colbert County after filing a police report, right? Or after filing a report against the police, a complaint against the police there.
Yeah.
Where are we with this?
Well, where we are is, we're at a point where his family, Mr. Richardson's family, has a civil rights attorney that they have retained, and they have gotten the FBI to agree to investigate this case. It's a troubling situation. He was found hanging, in an abandoned house. The family says that they don't understand or know of any reason why he would have even been at this house, let alone that he would choose that house to supposedly kill himself, which is the finding of the sheriff there in Colbert County. I don't know how, they say that he was apparently depressed. Well, how do they arrive at that? I don't know. And so they ruled the sheriff's office has ruled this a suicide. But the family, of course, is disputing this. Now, obviously, with the history of this country, when you talk about a black body being found hanging somewhere, we black folks and a lot of white folks, we immediately perk up and think, what's really going on here? Because of the history of this country, right? With lynching and everything else. And then when you stack on top of that, the fact that this comes in the aftermath of Mr. Richardson having filed a federal lawsuit in which he alleged that he was beaten and abused by the Sheffield police during a jail stay there in the Sheffield City jail. So you got that. Then you also have the fact that his wife has indicated that he told her that after he was arrested again on a drug charge, that he was told by the police that it would be dropped if the lawsuit was dropped. So you've got what appears to be something that could be pointing toward a very insidious plot to cover up and ultimately kill someone who had taken legal action against the Sheffield Police Department. This is why the FBI.
It's like a John Grisham novel going on here, basically.
No, you're right. Absolutely. So that's why I'm glad that the FBI is involved. I'm glad that they have an attorney representing them, and it's really concerning, again, from a historical standpoint, that this case seems to be playing out in this way. But then I also don't want to take anything away from the family. God bless them, and the Richardson family, and you just your heart goes out to them. What a chilling reality to live with, that your loved one may have been killed in this way, especially if there's a police cover-up involved.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this: we're going to follow this and see what's going on with the FBI and what's going on with them, and keep it going as much as we can. All right, so right-wing nut time. Let's wrap this baby up. Our right-wing nut is the chair of the Pardons and Paroles Board, Lee Gwatney, who got a rightful grilling on Wednesday. Before the oversight committee, the prison oversight committee, and she did not. I mean, it was not pretty for Lee Gwatney, nor should it have been. She has continually ducked questions, refused to talk to anybody, reporters, lawmakers, anyone. The last time she was there more than a year ago before this committee, she made some promises to answer some questions, has not done so, has not responded to the questions, many of which the lawmakers still have, pertaining to why that board has failed to follow its own guidelines in numerous instances. As a matter of fact, it's failed to follow its guidelines last year to the tune of 92% of the time. So 92% of the time did not follow its own guidelines in awarding pardons or paroles. And then, just and some other things, management, rewriting the guidelines themselves, what was going on. And she was taken to task for a lot of it, and not, thankfully, not just by Democrats. A couple of Republicans, namely Clyde Chambliss, also hopped in and were very critical of the way she's handled things, particularly refusing to answer their questions and provide information. And so that part at least was good to see, that this was not just a partisan effort to try to force the Pardons and Paroles Board to do what it's supposed to do. And that finally some Republicans seemed to be getting on board, although there still was Matt Simpson, a former prosecutor, who was praising them for, not just letting out anybody, like that's a huge concern for anyone at this point. So
this is obviously a very good example of just how political state government can be and the processes can be. Is this, now I will admit, I don't know a whole lot about the Pardons and Parole Board. I haven't looked into it in any real detail at all, unlike you. Is this a paid position? A compensated position?
I'm not sure if it's a paid position or not. But there's three people on it. I would assume it is, because it meets fairly regularly, and I can't imagine that it would not be a paid position with the amount of work that actually has to be done by them. Because if I'm not mistaken, they meet about once a week. So I believe that paid. I would assume that it is paid. Yeah.
So then what I also would ask, I mean, in light of that, is there should be a level of accountability. Yeah. And are you, I mean, based on what you shared so far, is the level of accountability only this legislative committee? Is there no other level of accountability that she and the Pardons and Parole Board have to face?
Well, I would assume that she would have to face some from the governor's office, which I believe Governor Ivey is the one who appointed her to that position. And so I would assume then that the governor could replace her on that board, just the same as she appointed her. But it is, I don't understand. First of all, I do understand. I know exactly why there's nothing been done to Gwathney. Is the fact that it's not a political winner for anybody when you're a Republican to replace somebody, even somebody who's not doing their job and clearly not doing their job, and who has alienated some Republicans by not doing their job. When we're talking about letting out prisoners. Because it then becomes, will she punish the person who was stopping the release of dangerous criminals on our streets? And so it's this is, they've used prisoners and that is as a political tool for a long time. That's the reason we're in the shape that we're in. Is because we don't, it's the reason the prisons are overcrowded. It's the reason why the prisons are so horrid. It's the reason why nothing ever changes. It's the reason why we can't follow the own guidelines that are written. It's the reason we're getting sued by the DOJ at this point. All of these things are that one thing is the impetus for all of these things happening, and it's not going to change because there's no political consequence for not changing it. Okay, none whatsoever. And so I appreciate these folks for standing up and at least calling her out for what she's done on that board and the way she's behaved. And at
least it's on the record. Yeah,
at least it's on the record, and so now they're at least people know and have some better understanding, and maybe it'll start to change some minds out there as well. All righty, that's it for today. That's it for this week. Until next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.